Hey, it's Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and I'm bringing you guys a review for Yakuza Dead Souls for the PlayStation 3. And before I begin this review, I have to warn you, if you're a fan of this series or this title in particular, you're probably not going to like this review. I do try to bring positive reviews that focus on what a game does well, but I had enough issues with this title that I'm having to leave out my usual mini cutscenes that I generally use for these videos because there was that much to discuss. But let's go ahead and start with the good stuff. The soundtrack's pretty amazing, had some really killer songs, some really nice beat music for the more intense sections of the game. The survival mechanics and the upgrade system were a couple bright spots. Wisely choosing your loadouts, the amount of ammo and health supplies, upgrading and equipping the correct armor and accessories all factor in. The ending to the game was good enough that it changed my outlook a bit on this title. As many complaints as I'm about to dish out with what's wrong with this game, the ending was its saving grace that may have swayed the scale into the decent zone, and I'll come back to that here at the end. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The first negative thing going against this game does have to do with the game world, in that it drags you through the same areas over and over and over again. This wouldn't be such a problem if the areas didn't already look a lot alike to begin with and reuse a lot of the same objects, but I was revisiting and fighting in the same areas so much that it felt like I was running in circles. Multiple missions had me run from one end of the zone to the other, then decide to turn me around, throw me a checkpoint, and ask me to fight my way all the way back to where I started from. This just doesn't equal fun and clearly shows they were either running low on ideas, lazy, or just didn't have the time to develop better ways to extend the gameplay. There's also an issue with the frame rate that becomes more obvious late in the game when it decides to fill the screen with zombies. There's some serious slowdown, but my game never froze up, so I guess it wasn't that big of a deal. Now, for a zombie title, I never really felt intimidated. There were a few nasty looking enemies that look as if they were pulled straight out of a Resident Evil game, but it's extremely easy to learn their attack patterns, and the way the game was designed just doesn't have any type of scare factor to it whatsoever. Not even zombies dropping in on my head in a closed-in elevator got my blood pumping, because they just latch a hold of you for a second, you tap the button a few times, they let go of you, you blast them once with a shotgun, case closed. The enemy physics when getting hit by bullets and the sound effects for the weapons were both pretty lacking. Just didn't have that same quality found in mowing enemies down in most other games, especially zombie shooters. You just don't get that same sense of satisfaction that you get killing zombies when playing, say, a Resident Evil title. By the time I reached the final chapter, I had killed close to 4,000 zombies, and I was pretty much tired of killing them by that point. If the game had lasted any longer, I would have just let them have the city and everybody in it. I'd be waving the white flag. And I also stopped caring about the story very early in my playthrough. After the first 3 or 4 hours, I started completely skipping through most of the cutscenes and the dialogue options when talking to NPCs, because I just couldn't get into what the game was trying to dish out with the story. And the big reason why is because of all the utter nonsense and jabber that it throws your way, so much so that it becomes hard to tell what actually matters to the events that are taking place and what was just added for filler. The main plot of the game seemed pretty cool, but it was hampered by very poor storytelling coupled with a lot of dialogue without voiceovers. It was very strange to go on a zombie bashing rampage, mowing down a couple hundred zombies, and then stopping every so often to have a casual chit-chat conversation about some pretty uninteresting plot points. It had very uneven pacing, to say the least. The game also leans heavily on its mini-games and the boss battles to break up the overly bland combat that goes from repetitive to just plain annoying in the last half of the game. In order to raise the difficulty, the game throws wave after wave of mobs in smaller and smaller areas in hopes of just beating you down in a corner. And once you do hit the deck, it can be very difficult to get back up or do anything other than just get smacked around some more. But in my 15-hour playthrough, I only died twice on normal difficulty, so again, it was more annoying than anything else. As far as the controls go, I can't recall any other title that had you aim with the left control stick opposed to the tried and true right. I can only imagine the game designer that approached the rest of the group and said, hey, let's do something totally out there, something totally different than what everyone else has done. Let's force the player to aim with the left stick instead of the right, and then not give them the option to change it. That would be pretty awesome. To make matters worse, when you're trying to quickly aim at an enemy, it doesn't matter what direction your camera is facing where you're looking, it only matters what direction your character is facing. So for example, if you have the camera pan to either side or behind your character and you press the button to pull up your crosshair to pull up your weapon, instead of it aiming where you're looking, it snaps to directly in front of you. This is beyond infuriating, especially considering that enemies can spawn in any direction around you, and the only way to aim at one that is really close to you is to run your character into them so that he will face that direction so that you can aim properly at the enemy, with the only other option to dodge or run away and then turn around. If that's not stupid, I don't know what is. The crosshair also moves incredibly slow with no way to increase the look speed. From a design standpoint, there really isn't any good excuse for setting the game up in this fashion. It really sucked a huge bit of the fun out of the combat, which is a shame because with a decent control setup, the combat could have been a lot of fun. The auto aim function that allows you to hold L1 and move left or right while targeting enemies directly in front of you works well, but it doesn't make up for the extremely poor manual aiming. Any good review of this title should focus a good bit of attention to just how bad the control scheme is, because it very well could be the worst overall setup and settings that I've seen on any title in the last few years. But if you're able to suffer and cope with the controls in the combat, there are some pretty fun minigames and things to keep you busy on here. In fact, after my first few hours, the minigames were really the only thing keeping me motivated, keeping me interested to continue playing. The bad part about the minigames is you're restricted to which ones you can access depending on what chapter you're currently in, so that's a bit of a bummer. However, once you clear the game, it does open up a free roam that allows you to travel around where you please and visit any of the minigames. If you're interested in checking out the 23 minigames found on here, I did do a separate video showcasing them. As far as the saving grace that I spoke of earlier in the review, the final boss battle was truly epic. Without spoiling anything, it was a pretty entertaining and well thought out fight, and it caught me a bit off guard because it was that good. The boss battles in general were decent, but the final one was worth dragging myself through the 15-hour campaign. This title does contain solid reasons to play through it more than once and some interesting trophies to go after, but even if you're not interested in playing a game twice or care about trophies, with the great soundtrack, boss battles, and numerous things that you can do outside of combat, it should be able to keep most people interested in playing through the game at least once. Final verdict on this, I would have been pissed off if I had bought this when it was brand new for full price, but if you can snag a copy for $20 or less, it can provide spurts of fun as long as you're willing to look past the issues with the combat. Anyways, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and thanks for stopping by.